And I want to thank everybody for being here. We should have some more folks rolling in. I did send a quick reminder. We had some mix up on Zoom for background for folks just doing some mix up on Zoom room stuff on our end that I think we solved before everything went out, but just in case, I just sent an email out to everybody one more time to make sure they had the right link. So I will share. Emily, would you rather, we didn't talk about this, but would you rather share and advance on your own? Because I think you'll be first out of the gate. Is that easier, or you want me to just do it for you?
Will you drive for me?
Yeah, happy to.
Yeah,
happy to. So we'll go ahead and share our screen here. Oops, hold on one second. Okay.
There. I can. Oh yeah, you got it.
There you go. Yeah, it was doing something weird for me. All right. And I thank y'all for being here today, activating nonprofits to register voters. National Voter Registration Day was earlier this week, and the deadline is coming up. And this has been a topic of discussion for Together SC for some time. And we always like to highlight efforts by some of our members who are doing work in this arena. So I also want to thank Blackbaud for their sponsorship of our Advocacy Allies Peer Network. I do want to introduce our speakers today, all of which are on our Advocacy Allies leadership team, actually. We love having them on there. Emily O'Brien is one of our co-chairs for the United Way of Greenville County, and I'll let y'all introduce yourselves around what you guys do at all these organizations in a second. And Katie Smith with Greater Good Greenville. Do y'all want to say hello?
Sure. Hi. Thank you for being here.
Yeah,
what's
delighted.
Your role sorry, tell us your role and kind of what's
Sure.
your role?
So I'm Emily O'Brien. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy at United Way of Greenville County. I've been in this role for a year and in the United Way Network for 3 years total. I was previously in the same role at United Way of the Piedmont in Spartanburg. So happy to be here. Thank you.
So glad to be with y'all. I'm Katie Smith, Executive Director of Greater Good Greenville, which has the footprint of Greenville County, and love working with Emily and GP since they're both here in Greenville County. And my colleague, Catherine Puckett, is on here, and love seeing you all here. We can make this a fun conversation because I think we probably have a lot to learn from you too.
Great. Well, I'm going to turn it over quickly to our speakers. One of the things we wanted to cover in this today is talking about sort of two I think you'll see two approaches to voter engagement with Emily and United Way of Greenville County, sort of their work in partnership with groups and registering voters through their service and programs. And then also Katie at Greater Good Greenville, who's done a lot of work on partnerships as well, but with other types of entities like the chamber, and also activating nonprofits themselves to make sure that their organizations are participating in the democratic process. So we kind of have two different approaches for folks to learn from today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Emily. He's going to go first. You can kind of see here. So some of the stuff we'll go through, which I jumped the gun on a little bit. But we'll have Emily kick us off. Emily? We will be recording this, but when it comes time for Q&A, if you want to throw them in the chat, but also at the end, we will stop recording for any questions or commentary that folks may have. So feel free to throw those questions in the chat throughout this presentation. Emily, you want to take it away?
Thank you so much, GP. So I am excited to share some of our framework for registering voters through our existing programs and services, direct services, and then I'll share a little bit about internal within our organization, some initiatives that we're working on as well. But United Way of Greenville County is leaning right into the voter education and registration space. And I'm so excited to share the main way we thought of doing this to get started was by following Katie's lead with the Greater Good Greenville initiative for Voting Matters. So she's going to share all about that. I don't want to steal her thunder. But Katie is really the driver of this work in nonprofits in Greenville. So I want to make sure we know that we would not have been able to move as far into this space without her leadership and without partnering with other nonprofits. But thinking back to January of this year, knowing the election season we were heading into, I did some brainstorming on what ways United Way directly reaches the community. We are not technically a direct service provider, but our main program that reaches the community, especially in the beginning of the year, is VITA, which is our Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program. We convene a coalition of 9 counties or 9 United Ways across the state to conduct the VITA service program for South Carolinians. And we have an enormous impact, both at the state level and within Greenville County, both in terms of dollars being saved from tax preparation and dollars coming in through tax credits that our volunteers are able to get each of our community members. And the VITA tax program is for households earning less than $60,000 a year. So knowing that reach, we thought a great way to get involved with voter registration in our programs was to offer some sort of voter registration when folks come to get their taxes done. Because when you show up with your documentation to do your taxes, you have every piece of information you need to register to vote. So I want to start by saying I had a big dream that every single one of our tax preparers would be able to register the folks whose taxes that they were doing, except we ran into a barrier. And the barrier is that AmeriCorps does not allow advocacy in any way, and it does not allow active voter registration. So the problem with United Way of Greenville County is that most of our tax preparers are AmeriCorps volunteers. We do have some retirees and community members, and those folks are allowed to register voters, but our AmeriCorps members who make up most of our tax preparation base in Greenville County sites are not allowed to do direct service or direct voter registration. So my dreams were crushed early on. I thought we could have a training for all of our volunteers on how to fill out a voter registration form. I was going to have QR codes that take you right to the digital forms. And then that came to a screeching halt, unfortunately, when our AmeriCorps director shared with me that they are not, in fact, allowed to do that. On the VITA tax forms themselves, there is a box that you can check if you would like information on registering to vote. And it's on the very last page of the sign-off sheet when your taxes are done. Our AmeriCorps members are allowed to mention that, but they can't really answer a lot of questions and they can't give you any more information. So that we had to quickly figure out a workaround. This was in January. Our tax season starts off in February. So what we decided to do was partner with the League of Women Voters. And this is the best thing that we ever did. I want to highlight our chapter here in Greenville County. They came to the table. They quickly organized volunteers. They met with us to understand how many tax clinics or sites around the county we operate. We have 8 sites between libraries and our building here in Greenville, the Opportunity Center, and quickly decided to figure out a way to really make sure that we can have League of Women Voters members at our sites when taxes are being done. We weren't able to reach all of our 8 sites just due to limited capacity. But thinking through next tax season, that's a major opportunity for us to be able to plan volunteer power at each of our 8 sites throughout the tax season. What we landed on was a permanent table here. This picture of our volunteers from the league is at our main tax site, which is at the United Way campus in Greenville. And they set up 8 tabling sessions for multiple days throughout our tax season. And we had one day we call the Tax Blitz, which is a full Saturday to do taxes at the very end of the season. They were also present there. So throughout the 8 tabling sessions with the league at our main tax site, we were able to register 11 new voters, which doesn't seem like a lot, but given our time constraints in the season, the AmeriCorps regulations, I'm very pleased with that. But my favorite thing about partnering with the league, besides their ability to wrangle volunteers and they're so organized, they also capture a lot of data. And as a one-person advocacy department, sometimes that's hard for me me to be able to do on my own. So the league records not only every registration, but they count how many postcard reminders they send out. They count how many conversations they had. So throughout those 8 tabling sessions, they had 120 conversations with folks to engage them about their voting plan, if they're registered, if they need to update their registration. They counted 110 postcard reminders that would be sent out where folks are giving them the address. The card will be mailed closer to the early voting deadline to remind folks to vote. And so the league is available across the state of South Carolina, whether you're in the Low Country or the Midlands, the PD, or upstate. We have multiple League of Women Voters chapters, and I recommend forming a relationship with them, not just for the actual volunteer power, but like I said, again, for their expertise and their data, which was so helpful for me to show our board and to show my department to really think about impact. And so now we have this relationship. We're thinking about going even bigger for tax season in 2025 in just a few months. So we'll go to the next slide, GP. This will also highlight League of Women Voters. I love giving them the spotlight. Our second program with direct reach into the community is the School Tools Back to School event. And this partners with the Greenville County Schools. We had 5 sites this year and distributed 5,000 backpacks for students going back to school in our schools. These are our highest poverty schools in Greenville County, and it was the largest distribution in our history of doing this program. And this is a great way to outreach with families. And so we knew we had to make sure that a voter registration was part of the services offered to families that day. There are often long lines waiting to walk through the gymnasium to assemble the backpacks. So we had audiences at 3 of our 5 sites, or 3 of our 5 schools. And the league, again, came in handy with not just their expertise, but with volunteer power. So there's no way that I could have been at all 3 sites registering people at the same time, but our league was able to get almost 15 volunteers across those sites to make sure that that was fully staffed. And in total that day, 28 parents were registered to vote, and 716 postcards or stickers were given out. So again, the league coming in handy with that data. I just think that's such a great partnership for us, and we'll continue to utilize the league's expertise and volunteer hours whenever we have community-facing events. The league, I also want to share, has incredible resources where we did not have to reinvent the wheel in terms of posters and QR codes. Their Vote 411 site is a great resource for folks across the state, and they also have links to scvotes.gov. So we're able to use some of their collateral, able to use those QR codes passively. We have at all of our tax sites, we had League of Women Voters posters, and so folks are able to register on their own using those QR codes, even if a league volunteer is not there or if I'm not there directly engaging our folks. So this is just an incredible partnership. I can't say enough. Susan D'Amato is in the blue t-shirt on the left in the back row. She is their outreach person and scheduling all of the voter registration events, and she has just been an incredible partner. And I'm just so grateful for their work for those 2 events. One event that we also, I didn't highlight in our slides, we also partnered with the NAACP in Greenville to work our volunteers for Martin Luther King Day. In January, we had 2 registrations come out of that, but we do plan to be proactive in our planning. And so we'll be able to offer voter registrations on our volunteer day in January this year as well. And our next slide, I'll just share a little bit about what we're doing internally to make sure that our culture of United Way, not just through our programs, but with our staff, is encouraging voting in every way, voting early, voting absentee, or voting on election day, making sure our registrations are done. And so we worked with our marketing team. A lot of our collateral, like I said, we didn't have to reinvent. We did just use a lot of our QR codes from the League of Women Voters. And so that saved our marketing team quite a bit of work to make sure that we could align with their messaging and just amplify their messaging as well. We did a staff push and a staff challenge to make sure that our staff was registered before the June primary. And we also did a board push. And again, I want to highlight Katie's work with some board challenges that happened throughout Greenville County. We were able to make sure our board members knew the historic participation rates, as well as where we were aiming for participation in the June primary. And we'll do that again in November. But the board members heard messaging at least 3 times throughout the year, 2 in-person board meetings and 1 virtual letter from our CEO encouraging registration. They heard from our social media team. And I think that was successful to the point where they would walk through my building and see me and say, I'm registered. I do not have to worry about me. I'm going to show up. So we think that messaging worked. And that last piece that I'll share is we have registration forms available in our Opportunity Center where folks are coming in throughout the year, not just during tax season. We have a little a folder of voter registration forms. And throughout the year, we've had 3 registrations come in. 1 actually just hit my desk on Monday. So I will be personally driving this after our webinar to the downtown election office to drop off for one of our community members who took the time to fill this out while they were getting services at United Way. So I just want to make sure that we're thinking through not just traditional means of passive registrations, but really being active with our staff and our board. I think that is a huge opportunity that a lot of nonprofits may not have tapped into before. And social media is a powerful tool. It's easy to repost and reshare, but those internal conversations with my team have been so meaningful. And I'm just grateful for the chance to share. So always happy to answer questions towards the end. But thank you, GP, for the time to share, and I'll pass it over to Katie.
All right. Well, Emily,
Thanks.
you are just, oh, sorry, go ahead, GP.
I was saying thanks. I was going to stop sharing and throw it to you, Katie. So go for it.
Awesome. Well, Emily is such an inspiration. And I honestly, I feel like the experience you went through with VITA, which I know, like, I could see it too, as you described what was going to happen. And then the roadblocks you hit and the way you worked around them and learned from them for what will happen next is, I think, the nature of this work. And I'll just also say that the ratio of registrations to conversations, I think, is what a lot of us will see, because voter registration is about 85% in Greenville County. Turnout is so much lower than that. So while we always need to register new people and make sure people's registration's up to date, like, it's getting the people to actually vote that is the work. So those postcards and conversations, I think, are super important. So huge congrats and thanks to you for what you're doing. I have a feeling that a lot of you all on this call are pretty seasoned in this. So I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly, as long as my little presentation will start. So I'm actually going to flip the order that I'm listed in, which was talking about Vote GVL and then Voting Matters. I want to talk in a little bit of a broad way about Voting Matters and nonprofits. I'm going to go through this again quickly because I think you all are pretty informed, and talking about what we're doing and then what the chamber's doing with Vote GVL. So Greater Good Greenville, we love activating people to engage in policy, and people is really through partners, just like United Way. So these are all nonprofits that we featured at various county council meetings or elected official events, or ways we have worked with together SC. This was at the 2023 summit, GP? Yeah, where we went to the State House. So we love partnering with our nonprofits to lift folks up and activate them. One of the biggest tools we have for informing voters is our Simple Civics Greenville County podcast that every week has lessons on local government, a little bit about state government, and then features candidate interviews. And we did 57 candidate interviews for this election year, which is wild. And those are all posting right now. But I think you guys all know this, which is why you're here. Policy and voting matter so much to nonprofits. So that you guys on this call care is vital. And I think a lot of people want to kind of think, like, this isn't something nonprofits should do. We're not allowed to do this. Yes, you are. However, this is not legal advice. So if you have any legal questions, Boulder Advocacy is a great free resource. But a lot of times people feel very nervous around elections and nonprofits. And number one, nonprofits can and should engage in advocacy. I'm presuming, again, that's why you all are here, that you get that. You can engage in a little bit of legislative lobbying, and there are limits to that. That's not the topic of today, so won't dive into what that means, but you can. And then election-related activities is where it gets a little bit trickier, but there are so many appropriate ways to do it, exactly like Emily just described. You cannot engage in partisan activities of any kind or any kind of things that prefer candidates, but nonpartisan voter registration, general education, election turnout, like you can and you should. So what can you do? If you focus on all of the people that are connected to your organization and not a party or candidate, that is 100% okay. I'm going to give a little asterisk to this on the next slide. You cannot incentivize, assist, or reward only a particular group. So if Emily had a voter registration table and water bottles were given only to those people that registered, that would not be okay. I don't know that a water bottle is a tremendous incentive for anyone anymore, but you have to give a water bottle to anyone who comes up. So no particular sorting of who signs up. And then as the election gets closer, you have to be very careful about the issues. So if there's an issue that you haven't focused on in the past and suddenly you're very keen on it, and it is a core part of a race that's happening, then that is where you got to be careful. But again, Boulder Advocacy and the Alliance for Justice are here for you with abundant free resources. So what you can't do, again, is focus on a candidate or party or appear to do so. So you can't collaborate with candidates to say, hey, we really are trying to turn out this neighborhood or this precinct. And you say, I'm on it. Let me go put my nonpartisan signs up on those corners. That is clearly not okay. You can't focus on populations or demographics because they are more likely to focus on a particular party, unless those are your usual people. So if, for instance, you are the Urban League and you always work with people of color, and now it's election time, and you're going to turn out people of color for that, even though historically Black neighborhoods and voters tend to vote Democratic, that's what you do. So that's, of course, who you would turn out. A pivot to a different population because of who you think they're going to vote for is where it gets tricky. And then you don't want to mention your position on issues that are very relevant to a campaign. Like we have the penny roads tax happening in Greenville County this year. We have never, Greater Good Greenville has never taken a position or an interest in things like roads and infrastructure in any way. So if we put that front and center and said, we really support this, wink, wink, vote for the candidates that also support this, that's where it can get tricky. But if you are just saying, hey guys, vote, we don't care who you vote for, we just want you to turn out, you are completely in the safe zone. We have a lot of elections in South Carolina. I think something between 200 and 300 elections go on in any given year. But right now we are talking about the general election on November 5th. That is what we are about. The thing that we have that is a little bit tricky, well, let me sit here for a second, is that if you follow the news, you know that we have a presidential election happening, and you know that because of our electoral college, South Carolina's votes will probably not make us, we can predict exactly what's going to happen with South Carolina's votes in that presidential race, which makes it easy for people to either think their vote isn't important if they really pay attention to that, or to be so, I was going to use the word distracted, and it's important, so I don't want to use that negative word, but with all the attention going on the presidential race, it's easy to forget. We've got school board races, we have county council races, we have sheriff's races, and people forget to keep going down the ballot. So that's a place of an important attention that a nonprofit might want to place on an election. So I think as you think about what you might do, it's really important to think about your why and the why of the people you're going to activate. And back in the primary, a key message we had was that in Greenville County, primary races were your only chance to vote because almost half of our races were contested only in the primary. Once people realized that, I think they went, oh, well, usually I treat that as the extra credit assignment, but like if I'm going to vote, this is the time to do it. Another message is school board is often forgotten because in Greenville County and in most counties in the state, it is nonpartisan. If you vote straight party or if you don't keep going down the ballot, you'll miss out on something that's super important to the people that you serve. You can share messages like people like you don't show up and your voice isn't heard, which is super true for young people, for instance. Youth serving organizations should say, your voice is not getting heard because you're not there, even though you represent a large portion of our county population or our state population. Or a message like, voting is what leaders do. And if you are a leader, why are you not showing up? Emily referred to the fact that we in the chamber took a kind of census of boards in Greenville County by looking at actual voter participation data and found that less than half of board members of very important boards like United Way, the Chamber, the Peace Center, were not voting in primaries. So a little bit of shame or peer pressure, can be a little helpful in that sense. So we really leaned into that in the 2024 primary because we lifted up that data about turnout compared to impact and how different it was. And it hopefully made a difference this year. So let me just skip back to this. So for you to think about the folks that you serve or your boards or your volunteers, the things that really impact someone's likelihood to vote is awareness, access, impact, and community. So one, are they even aware something is happening and have it on their radar? This is really hard, especially in local races and municipal races, because candidates only have so much money to spend, and they're going to put signs up and hand out flyers and do mailers to likely voters because that's who they want to make sure turn out. And if you are an unlikely voter, you're a renter, you're a young person, you're in a neighborhood that might not be as likely to turn out, you might not even know something is going on. That is something we can do. We can let our clients, boards, et cetera, know. There are also school board races, guys. These are really important. Pay attention, whatever that may be. Having access to voting is really important. And that could be something like reminding people that early voting starts October 21st. Treat election day as the deadline. Life happens. Get out there. Can we give you rides? Can we help you order an absentee ballot? What are the rules around it, all that? So helping open the door for greater access. There's a lot to say about election law in general and in South Carolina. I'm going to focus on the positive things that we can do, and access is one of those. Impact. Will my vote have an impact? Again, we had great success in the primary because absolutely, with such terrible turnout, every vote really mattered. In this presidential year, reminding people that although your vote may not change the outcome of the presidential race in South Carolina, either because you're a Republican and you know it's going to go hard that way anyway, or you're a Democrat and you feel like it'll be just a teeny tiny ripple in a very large pond, reminding people that people don't keep going. So school board, county council, sheriff, you really can make a difference. And then community. Are my friends and people like me voting? Nonprofits, churches, all the like have a built-in community that can remind each other and say, this is a thing that we do. This is how we show up. So that's just naturally built into the work of nonprofits. Now, all of this can get super overwhelming. So kind of ignore this bottom part of the slide. It's actually kind of straightforward. People have 3 things they need to do. They need to register to vote or check their registration. They need to learn about the candidates, and then they need to go vote. Oh, that date is wrong, y'all. That should be October 21st. Apologies. So what we found as we were working so hard on this in the primary is that the general public, and I put in this our very own board of directors, just don't really think about this until it's just time to go. They're not studying and learning and talking about this like nerds like all of us on this call are. So people have got to register or check their registration, and that is the thing you can focus on. Put it in newsletters, put it in social media, make calls to people, and make sure they double check their registration. And then help them learn about candidates, connect them with resources. I cannot give enough plugs to League of Women Voters as well. Vote 411 has got great resources for many, many races. Here in Greenville County, we've got our Simple Civics podcast to be helpful, but help people learn. If they're like, I don't know enough about what school board even does, be someone who can answer that for them or connect them with resources. And then make sure they vote. Again, so sorry about this typo here. With really our abundant early voting period, help people know you can get out there. You've got some Saturdays voting is open. We have 6 or 7 early voting places in Greenville County. I'm not sure about other counties, but help people know it's time. It's time. Don't forget. Don't forget. So there are resources I'm going to put in the chat when we're done, but registering and checking registration is actually pretty darn easy. if someone has the kind of ID that is needed. So that's another asterisk where sometimes that is not the case. But really, if someone is sitting with you at a meeting, you can pull this up right then or tell them to do it, and they can check their registration or register in a second. It really like takes less than 5 minutes. So helping folks do that is important. So here's some ideas. The same way you would get the word out to any client or board member, push the information out and help create that awareness and feeling of community that is so important. I'm not going to spend more time on this because I think you guys get this. Push the information out, let folks know. Okay, so let me touch on an example of that in Vote GVL, and then we can get on over to conversation and questions. So Vote GVL is an initiative that the chamber is championing, and they are really picking a slice of the world that does not turn out well, and that is young professionals. Now, this information is relevant to anybody, but particularly young professionals are not showing up at the polls like we might hope at the same rates as other audiences are. So they have a fabulous social media campaign, and this is from their Instagram. That's just Vote GVL, that I really recommend you follow because it can give you inspiration too about how to repurpose some of their messaging for your audiences. But they have a lot of just basics to help people understand we've got state races while we have federal races. They're raising information about that penny sales tax we have. They're trying to create imagery of you're a part of this community. Here's what you can do. They're using influencers locally to help spread the word. So they are really deeply going into these young professional audiences and have great data on how much of a following they had, a really amazing following throughout the primary, and they're continuing it. So strategies as simple as this are things that you can do, and just embedding it in your regular communications with folks. Here's the thing. I've like used this slide literally since 2010, I think. And I love it so much because the point of this is, and this is all, these are like old. You can see this is when the Tea Party was the thing. There are groups that are highly activated and they are great at things like, impact, community, awareness, access. And it is really incumbent upon all of us to do the same because this is the pinnacle of social service, if that's the kind of organization you do. We are often providing social services because systems aren't working like they should for folks. And the people that are impacted by those systems best know, what might make a difference and how can I let my elected official know it? So I just can't say enough about the opportunity. I can drop some of this in the chat for y'all. So if you want to click on any of these, they can be really helpful. But the first thing I'm going to drop in the chat for you is a fabulous toolkit that our Greenville League of Women Voters, like really, we should just have them do this whole webinar. They are so fantastic, as Emily said, and they've made an amazing toolkit with resources in English and in Spanish that you can use to share with any of your constituents. And then the last plug I'll give is to nonprofitvote.org, which is a national movement to get nonprofits to vote. And they have greatly inspired us and the work that we are doing here in South Carolina. So that's it for my formal stuff, but I would just love some dialogue with everybody. So GP, thanks so much.
Thank you, Katie. Hold on, I'm trying to do all the spotlight things. I'm also going to go ahead and stop recording. I appreciate all the content, and this will be available on Together SC's website.